Good morning, everyone. Sorry for all of the technical delays, but I guess we can just get started. So this is our GRE/grad school panel. This is our first panel in a series of three, the test/grad school or test/school panel. And so joined here with us, we have Jacob and Natalie, who both took the GRE and who are both in grad school now. And so for a quick reminder, could you guys provide your name, major, graduation year, current occupation or school, and then just something interesting about yourself?
Okay, yeah, sure. I'll go first. Hi, everyone. My name is Natalie Dio. I graduated from Cal State LA in 2021, and my major was electrical engineering. Right now, I am doing an academic part-time at NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory, and I'm also a part-time student, a master's student at the University of Southern California, or USC. My major there is astronautical engineering. And something interesting about myself, I can just share what I'm doing at work. I'm working on a really cool project. It's called Cadre, or Cooperative Autonomous Distributed Robotic Exploration. It is a project, a technology demonstration that's going to be sent to the moon next year. And I'm doing validation and verification for it. So really cool stuff.
Hi, everyone. I'm Jacob. I am, I'm at Caltech right now for my PhD. I'm in the biochemistry and molecular biophysics option, or the BMB option. When did I graduate? I graduated in 2021. And I was a biochemistry major in undergrad. And yeah, so now I work with Michael Elowitz in the biology department. We do a lot of synthetic and systems biology, so a lot of bioengineering, but also more so trying to understand like more fundamental principles, not just build something. And I guess a fun fact is back in EEP and still to this day, I do parkour at a local gym. So that's something I like to do for fun.
Well, thanks so much for introducing yourself. We really want to dive more into the details later, but we want to start with questions about the GRE. So to begin, we wanted to ask, can you describe which texts you took, like GRE, in addition to any subject tests?
Yeah, so I actually just took the general GRE. It was during COVID, and so it was during a time where GRE scores were not mandatory to be submitted. But it did help your application if you had a good score. So I was like, okay, all right, I'll take it. Hopefully I get a good score. So yeah, just general GRE for me.
I also only took the general GRE. I took it before COVID, and then I applied after COVID, or like during COVID. And yeah, none of my schools required the GRE. Some of them didn't accept it. And I recently checked, and at least for biochemistry, a lot of the top programs won't even take it anymore. So this is something that has changed a little bit over the past few years.
Okay, so if you guys both took the general GRE, then could you describe your study schedule for the GRE? Because to our understanding, there are two sections of the GRE, well, three, including the writing section. But the multiple choice questions are verbal reasoning and quantitative reasoning. So a little bit like the SAT/ACT. So what was your study schedule like? Was it similar to how you guys studied for the SAT/ACT when you were applying to?
So for me, I kind of looked over the test at first, and I took a practice test. I was just trying to see how I was and how comfortable I was with the questions. So the quantitative side was what I was far more comfortable with versus the qualitative side, or the vocabulary side. So I spent just a bunch of free time. I had Quizlet on my phone, and I would just go through the different terms and stuff, and just quizzing myself in my free time. In terms of essays, I despise writing essays, so I did not do too many of them, but I did do some. But I'll be completely honest about that. In terms of like schedule or how much time I spent, I would say I'm definitely on the lower side. I will admit that. And I only spent maybe like a few hours a week studying, just because that was during my senior design time, a senior design project. And then that summer, I had an internship. And so I just spent a lot of time on that. For prep books, I did use the Kaplan GRE prep book. That's probably just the most popular one. So my main resources were that. It's like respective app. They had an app for it that helped you study, and then Quizlet.
Yeah, I'm pretty much the same as that. I did not go pretty hard on the GRE. I maybe studied just a little bit each week. Like, and I was mostly just trying to learn like the tricks. Like I wasn't trying to memorize the whole vocabulary book or whatever. But there are some tricks, like especially like the math section or like the essay section, where like it's just like a thing that they can tell you to do that is just like prepares you for the test. So that's mostly what I was just trying to learn before I took it.
Could you share some of the tricks you learned?
Oh, I don't remember any of them now. But I just bought like a, I don't know, $10-15 book off of Amazon, and it was, there are some like math tricks for like the probability problems that you wouldn't maybe learn in calculus, or some of the essay tricks about like what they're looking for. I don't remember any of this now, actually. Maybe Natalie remembers some of them.
It was just honestly just how you would approach different problems. And depending on what your background was, like for me, since I was in electrical engineering, I had a probability class that I took. But there were other statistical methods that I wasn't familiar with. So, people kind of taught me some of those and just like shortcuts. And it was kind of like a DIY in a way. And just a small teach yourself for the things that you didn't know, and just kind of a nice reminder for the things that you did know. In terms of like specific tricks, I also don't remember, but I just remember the way that the book was phrased was just kind of how you want to approach the problem, and how you want to visualize the problem, and just kind of getting through them in a fast manner, really.
Well, thank you guys so much for your explanation of your study strategy. I think they'll be really helpful to everyone watching. And I think we touched on this question a little bit earlier, but we wanted to ask, do you feel the GRE is significant to the grad school admission process? But I guess both of your answers will be no, but as a follow-up, if not, what part of the application process do you think is the most significant?
Yeah, this is probably field specific. There may be some fields out there that still rely on the GRE, at least for biosciences and chemistry. Yeah, I don't think anyone relies on it anymore. Natalie said there is like the very niche case where if like you have bad grades or you went to some random school, like way more random than Cal State LA, then the GRE could help like prove yourself, but it's really not even that related to things in grad school, so people generally don't give it too much weight. I think what is the most important for PhDs, which is research focused, is of course research experience, which manifests in the form of your essay. You'll have some statement that is about your research. So like reviewers want to see how that you're passionate about your research, that you were involved in it, you kind of pushed it forward and thought deeply about those problems. And then it also comes up, like your research experience also comes through in your letters. And I don't think people understand like how important your letters are. Like a good letter can get you into a program that you would not otherwise get into. And so having good letters can be very, very powerful for getting into grad schools.
Yeah, definitely want to echo that. For me, we were kind of talking about this before it started, but Jacob is doing a research-based education, and I'm doing a non-thesis based education. And so we have different paths. So definitely in the application process, it's a little bit different as to what they look at. For me, I would say it's more of the statement of purpose, but also yes, the letters was a big deal. It can definitely make or break your case. So I would say 100% being able to express yourself and being able to have other people express you and having those be consistent, and just having it show that you are capable of getting work done, that you're capable of representing what the school wants in their students. And yeah, so definitely different from a research perspective or a thesis-based perspective. But yeah, it is very important. And so for me, GRE was not important. Fortunately, I would say, if anything, for me, I did not have a great score. I had a good score, but not the, near 100% score that you so often hear about. But so for me, it was like, if I didn't have like a perfect score, I just wasn't like thinking that I was going to include it. So I would say if you had a great, amazing score, sure, it could definitely help boost your case. For me, I don't think it really made or broke my case necessarily. So yeah.
One thing that I do remember about the GRE actually is that typically sometimes you report your percentile as well. And like the funny thing is, okay, I didn't do great on the GRE either. So I have friends though who did. And like if you get, like, the funny thing is, like, for the math section, like just 90th percentile or like top 10% is perfect score on the math. Like if you miss one question, you're already like down to like 85 percentile or something crazy. So yeah, that was weird. But since we said letters are so important, I guess the two things I did want to say. One is that, like, you're perfectly fine for your letter writers, like, to just send them like a blurb about yourself to like give them something like a starting place for your letter. Like that is totally normal, since they're not going to have like your whole life story memorized. Just send them, something like a bullets of things you're emphasizing in your application or what your other experience was, and that will give them a starting point for their letter. The second thing is, I think this is the biggest place where going off campus for at least a little bit will help. And this is because, doing like a summer research experience or some internship will give you letters from people who have, maybe a broader network. And so, you might apply to a school who knows your letter writer personally and can trust them, or, or you could work with a big name in the field, or just anyone who could say, like, I've trained 20 students who went on to have successful PhDs, and this person is working on par with how well those students were doing. And just having that level of like being able to make those comparisons can help vouch for your application.
For the we're going to get into the statement of purpose and letters of recommendation a little bit later, but for a more like broader question on the application, before we dive into the specific aspects, what was the mindset when applying to grad school? So was there any specific part of the application that you focused a lot on, or in general, was there like a specific mindset in terms of like what schools you were targeting? What was your just like broad mindset in those few months when you were applying?
For me, it was, I remember my dream grad school was Stanford or Caltech, and I didn't get into them and I survived. That's great. But when I was applying, I think it was just a matter of making sure that I had time and making sure that I wasn't rushing it. I knew there were a lot of people who did that, and it definitely added a lot of stress to them at the end. I was grateful that I was able to start a little bit earlier, and I was able to kind of take my time with going through it. So that was something that I was grateful about. Changing my mindset, I would say anything about like, my mindset, I would say just not be so focused about a dream school, which is completely fine to be focused about dream school. But in hindsight, I remember the day that I got my rejection letter from Stanford, which was my top choice. I was so sad for like a solid hour. And then literally an hour later, I got a call from JPL and they were giving me an offer. And I was like, I remember in that 1 hour, I was like, oh my God, my future has been derailed. I'm never going to make it a JPL because that was my dream place. And I'm never going to achieve the dreams that I had. And then literally just 1 hour of derailment. I had an offer. So it was something that I would definitely stress, is that these that getting into a school or not getting into school will not mean the end of the world or the beginning of one for you.
Yeah, I want to echo everything Natalie said. Like a lot of people, I don't know where this actually comes from, but a lot of people treat it like there's like a soulmate like issue. Like there's one school that is like the best for you. But like no, like if you're, I mean, I'm sure everyone who's listening to this, you know, is going to be a great applicant to whatever you're trying to apply for. And if that's really the case, then, you know, that means you can do well at the Stanfords of the world, and you can also do well at the lesser known public or private institutions of the world. Like there's not one school that you're only going to, you know, you should be able to do well at any school. So there's going to be lots of great options that you'll have. So just try not to stress about it too much. I was part of the more programs on campus, which are great. Nothing against them, but they do require you to apply to a bunch of schools. I mean, no one actually does it, but like they required us to apply to 15 schools, and then you apply to you just apply to a bunch, but not that many. But it was still a lot, I would say. So yeah, I would probably have applied to less schools, and then like Natalie said, just focus on those and make sure you have a good application for each of those. Take your time. Let's see what else. I also wish I had more. I mean, it was hard because everything was over Zoom. But if I were applying again today, I would have had more fun with it. Like, because really, when you're interviewing at these schools, it's kind of like just a chance for you to network with literally everyone in the field. And so like that shouldn't be so stressful. It's a chance for you to fly to all these different institutions and just have fun talks with the professors. Like the interviews aren't them grilling you. It's supposed to just be a fun chat.
Well, thank you guys both for your perspective. I think it's really helpful to know, like Natalie said, like Natalie and Jacob said, there's no one school for each person. Like you'll do great wherever you get in. And for our next question, we wanted to change the time frame a little bit. Like now that you actually are in grad school, did you feel prepared for grad school? And if so, what experiences like research, internships, volunteering, things, classes helped you the most?
That's actually a really great question, because astronautical engineering, which is what my master's is in, is heavily mechanical based. And so from an electrical engineering background, I had and still have a lot of catching up that I have to do. And I have to shift my mindset from an electrical engineering perspective to more of a mechanical aligned perspective. And so definitely I kind of wish I was able to broaden my horizons a little bit more in terms of like the classes that I took. I was so focused on, hey, I want to be done pretty soon, that I didn't really think about taking different classes and stuff like that. So I feel like that would have 100% benefited, but I did have some experiences that taught me a lot. Like I had a couple of different internships and a couple of different experiences that taught me more about what I wanted to do. So I actually spent my second summer doing research at Cal State LA. And that's where I learned research was not my forte. And that's where I was able to say, hey, when I go apply to, my graduate education, I know that I'm not going to want to do a thesis-based education. I'm going to want to do, something similar to what I had in my undergraduate experience, where I didn't do as much research and did more classes and stuff like that. In terms of internships and volunteering and stuff, I was a volunteer at the local space museum near my house, because where I live is home of the Apollo missions. So we have a space museum here. It's really cool. So that was able to showcase my passion for STEM. And I feel like that really helped show that this is beyond a professional kind of interest. And it was more of something that I was passionate about. So that was something. And then in terms of internships, I had interned at Cal Poly Pomona College of Engineering my first summer. I interned at at Northrop Grumman my fourth summer, and that was systems engineering. So it helped me broaden my horizons a little bit. And then I did an internship for NASA Goddard Space Flight Center, and that was Maryland, but that one was a remote one. So that one helped me kind of understand. I had one internship that helped me understand private sector and one internship that helped me understand public sector. So that was something that really helped. So yeah, many different things that kind of help. So yeah.
Yeah, so I guess let's see. I'll talk more about things that I guess, or the way I heard this question is like things that prepared me for grad school rather than just like helped me get in. But I think for me, those are mostly all in one. I think like for the PhD, like I said, research experience is key. So I did research at Cal State LA. I worked with Dr. Ishian Wong. And then kind of in 2 summers, and I don't even remember, like after my 3rd and 4th years, I did like a summer internship here at Caltech, and then during the COVID years, I did some remote internship with another lab. And so I think having those research experiences were good. I got to kind of taste a few different areas. That gave me a better sense of like what kinds of programs I wanted to apply to. And like I mentioned, like I got to work with a couple of different mentors who each had like a different perspective and different pieces of good advice. I will say, I mean, in terms of like preparing for grad school, I think research is the number one thing. Like for us, the classes aren't that important. We only take a handful of classes, and no one cares about your grades. The like tests are all take home, you know, nothing that crazy. I will say, I think the one thing that I wanted a lot more of is anything on the quantitative side. I think it might just be Cal State LA, but could also be a lot of other schools, is that like the biology or biochemistry programs really don't emphasize like quantitative skills. Whereas like I would have liked to take way more math classes. I would have liked to code a lot more, even though I'd taken the biostats classes, like the regular and the advanced, I still would have wanted more stats or like just a better stats class. Because yeah, those are the things I ended up taking once I came to Caltech, because I wanted more of that. And now, you know, we use crazy stats and programming like every day.
The one thing that I heard both Natalie and Jacob's answers was just in your undergrad, you wish there was more of like an interdisciplinary mix of both coursework and when you did have that interdisciplinary mix in your cases, you feel like that is what really prepared you for grad school. I can definitely see that, because right now research is just so interdisciplinary. Code, CS, math, those are like integral aspects in whatever research field you do. So yeah, thank you for your answers. Getting a little bit more specific into the application process itself, and our unique perspective as EEPsters, did you like mention the fact that you were in EEP at all in your applications? And if so, what was your perspective on it? Do you feel like mentioning that you were in EEP positively, negatively, or didn't have any effect on your kind of application?
Yeah, so I did mention being an EEP because I feel like not necessarily in the way of it being a matter of prestige or anything, but because of how EEP shaped my experience as a candidate, as a person, as a student, just in different ways how EEP shaped my experience. And so I mentioned it in my statement of purpose, where I was like, you know, being an EEP changed me for the better. And I had unique experiences because of it. And obviously, you know, there is that, there is that prestige of being an EEP. I mean, it's a crazy thing when you really look at it from an outside perspective. But I don't think it was necessarily an advantage or disadvantage. I think it was supplemental to my application, but I don't think it was necessarily anything that put me above any students or put me below any students. It just helped explain myself and my position better. So yes, I did mention, being an EEP, and I mentioned how getting in helped a lot. And I think the other thing that's important to mention is mentioning EEP and Cal State LA together is really helpful, because unfortunately we're just in this society where people look at state schools and look down on it, and it sucks. It absolutely sucks, because I believe that I have the same great education as anyone in any prestige institution or prestige institution. And so for me, I also mentioned EEP because I wanted to explain that is why I went to Cal State LA. Like, the reason why I went to Cal State LA was because of EEP. So that was different. That was another reason why I mentioned it. But yeah, so I would say that there wasn't any great advantage or disadvantage to mentioning it, but I think it just helped the whoever was looking at my application get to know me better as an applicant.
Yeah, I agree. I think, yeah, if you do want to mention EEP, it should tie into some of whatever story you're trying to tell in your letter. You definitely shouldn't just like drop it in there randomly. Yeah, so I did mention it, but very briefly, and towards the end of my essay. And it was just kind of tying into something else I was talking about. Like in my application, I was talking about how I like to mentor students and train students, kind of how that ties into like wanting to go into an academic route. When I mentioned EEP, I was saying how because I started so early, I needed lots of mentorship and support, and that kind of showed me firsthand the importance of those kinds of things. So it was something that just reinforced something I was already saying in my application. Because EEP on its own, what I've found is like just the fact on its own doesn't influence people's perspective of me too much. Maybe some people, like a small percentage of people, think it's impressive. A small percentage of people would be worried that you're underexperienced, and that kind of just balances out. I think this is worse for the med school students, though. I will say it tends to negatively impact the med school students a lot more, because those are the kinds of applications where they want you to have a lot of life experience and people skills.
Well, thank you guys both so much for your answers on that topic. And as I think you mentioned at the end there, Jacob, it's relevant to the other applications as well, like whether you should or shouldn't talk about your status as an EEPster. But moving back to a topic I think you touched on a little bit earlier, Jacob, we wanted to talk about what criteria you use to narrow down your school list that you're applying to. Like, what were the primary factors that made you decide to apply to a program, and eventually how many did you apply to?
Sure. So like I was saying, we were supposed to apply to 15. No one actually did. I applied to 10 schools, but 12 programs, because some of those schools had multiple programs, which is still too many. I think 6 to 8 is more of the sweet spot for bioscience PhDs, at least, because ideally you have like some that are like, it's hard to know like what schools are like, how prestigious different schools are. That's kind of what your advisor or your PI is supposed to help you with. They kind of have some idea how selected the different schools are. So you want to have, some schools that are like safeties that you're pretty sure you can get into, maybe a couple reach schools, and they'll help you figure out how that works for each field. That's kind of what I did. And then I think for the PhD, at least, the biggest thing is you just want to make sure there are as many like labs as possible that you're interested in at each school. It's like I would never I didn't apply to schools unless there were at least like 3 labs I could potentially be interested in. Typically like 5, because most of the time, some of those labs won't even be working on the same thing anymore. The websites are always outdated, so that knocks down a few. And then maybe like the PI isn't taking people or is a bad person, so that knocks down a few. But essentially, yeah, you want to make sure there's hopefully going to be at least a lab that is good and you're interested in working with at each of those schools, because otherwise, like, why would you want to go there? So that was pretty much the big thing. Is I was just going through university department websites and seeing what different people did. I guess one other thing is these are very, very small details, so I definitely didn't use it for my like list. But once I did have a couple offers, like you can consider like the logistics of the program. Like do they do rotations? Like rotation, I think rotations are very good. How restrictive are the class requirements? You know, like, is it hard set or is it very flexible? And like, what do you have to do for candidacy? Like some programs make you do a lot more for candidacy and like just general program requirements than others.
I think it's really cool that we have that Jacob and I are the ones that are doing this, because you have Jacob who does research and is doing a PhD, and then you have me who's doing a master's and not a thesis and not research. So I think it's really cool that we have those two different perspectives, because for me, I totally get why Jacob would say 6 to 8 schools, because if you're applying for research, you want to make sure that that where you're spending, 5 to 6 years is going to be fit for you, and not just that topic that you're researching, but the group that you're with, the advisor that you have. And that makes a lot of sense. For me, I was like, because of the fact that I'm not spending as much time at the school, because of the fact that I'm not spending as much time doing applications, and I didn't have interviews because like I said, that there's not an advisor or a group that I'm working with, I felt more comfortable applying to a little bit more. So I applied to, like, I want to say 11 schools in total. And I was like, I feel like that was a fit number for me personally. It's going to vary for everybody. But for me, I had 3 different categories. I had reach schools, and then, so, obvious reach schools and safety schools, but I actually had a middle category where it was just like, these are the schools that I think that are not guaranteed as a safety would be, but are not exactly a reach. So they're a moderate one. And so I had 3 to 4 schools per area. And so then I kind of so I first came up with my schools, and then I listed them in there, and I wanted to make sure that I had enough per section. And so for me, I looked at programs that I was interested in. So, I knew that I did not want to do specifically aerospace, because I was not interested in the aeronautics part, but just the space part. So that kind of heavily narrowed down the search that I had. So that was a program that, or that was an area that I was interested in. I was also interested in mechatronics, which is a combination of mechanical and electronics. And that's also a very niche program, a niche major. So I was looking at programs for that. And so that's a different thing. And then, I had a lot of my safeties were ones where it was like electrical engineering based programs, and just staying in like the same field that I was in. But I knew personally that I wanted to reach out. So that's why, or, broaden my horizons. So that's why a lot of my safeties and that middle category tend to be more of these niche and specific programs. So that's kind of what helped. So yeah, literally just, I remember I was just looking up schools with space engineering programs, schools with mechatronics programs. And when I was looking at electrical engineering, it's a very popular thing. So a lot of schools are going to offer it. I was looking at concentrations that they had. And so, robotics concentration or something like that. And so that's what I was looking at. So that kind of helped me narrow it down, was because of my interests, and I knew exactly where I wanted to go for my master's. It really helped me. And I know that's not going to be the same case for everybody, but whatever you can find that helps you narrow down, that that kind of like sparks that interest in you, if it can help you narrow it down, definitely recommend just kind of having some schools focused around that, not all of it. Don't put all of your eggs in one basket. But yeah, so that was my experience.
Oh yeah, before we move on, Natalie didn't mention, like which programs at different schools you actually apply to. This is, okay, in some cases it's important, in some cases it's not. Talk to your advisor, but yeah, some people wonder, like, do I apply to the program that my background is in or that I want to do? If you're like thinking of pivoting a little bit, I think either is fine. You have a much better chance of getting into a program if you have a background in that. And at least like somewhere like Caltech, for example, I had a biochemistry major. I applied to the biochemistry program, but once you're there, you can work with whoever you want. So like I work in a systems biology lab now, and that's not a problem. Some schools do have restrictions about, like, if you're in this program, you can only work with these people. So that is something to know about. And so if you do want to like work in a particular field, you want to make sure that you're allowed you're going to be allowed to work with those people. But it does help to apply to the thing that your background is in, and when you're interviewing, you know what the people are talking about.
So a theme that I heard across both Natalie and Jacob's answers, even though you applied to different types of graduate programs, from what I understand, it's all about the fit, because you're going to spend a few years at the school, no matter if you're spending 2 years or if you're spending 5 to 6 years doing a PhD at the school. And so you want to make sure that not only the lab that you're applying to, the program that you're applying to is somewhere in your interests, but also the general environment of the school. And you want to make sure that you're applying to schools that you'd be happy to spend the next like 5 to 6 years of your life working in, or living around the area as well. But yeah, moving into a little bit more details on the actual application process. So now that we've like narrowed down our schools, what timeline did you follow? So for example, just to give a little bit more structure to this question, what tasks did you do every month? So in what months did you focus on reaching out to faculty, or in what months did you focus on asking your letter writers for letters? In what months did you start writing your statement of purpose, revising your statement of purpose, etc.?
Oh, okay. So actually, you did mention something really fast that I wanted to go back in the previous question. For me, I also did heavily consider location. I'm not a cold weather person. I hate cold weather. So I knew I wasn't going to find myself up in like, high East Coast. So, even though you have like MIT, which is a great school, a great engineering school over there, I knew that I would not fit there simply because of the weather. I knew that it was going to get to me. So that's what I figured. But anyway, going back to the current question. The timeline that I followed. So as I mentioned a little bit ago, I was not being characteristic to my normal procrastinating self. And I actually like started ahead of time. It was weird. But so I actually did get started a few months ahead of time. And that was when I just kind of started looking at applications, looking at programs. I feel like I spent like the summer as I was studying for the during the GRE, when I was studying in the summer, I was looking at programs, I was looking at schools towards the end of my 4th year too, because I did 5 years. I was also looking at schools then, talking to people, having small conversations here and there. Summer came, started doing more research into it, started studying for the GRE, and then started wiggling down my school list in early summer. Finalized it in like late summer, I would say. Looked at how I needed to prepare for each of these schools' application process. Late summer and very early fall was when I wrote my statement of purpose, which I know we're going to touch in a little bit, as Selena said. But that's when I was starting to do that and started to really edit, wiggle it down, and stuff like that. And also in the mid-fall, because applications were due in December for the most part for me. So mid-fall was when I reached out, asked for a letter of recs, sent my resume to them, said a little blurb about me to them, and said, hey, I'd really appreciate it if you could write a letter of rec for me. And so that's when I started doing that. And I made sure my applications were in, like, I want to say at most like a month in before, at the least like 2 weeks in before. I was like, I'm not gonna lie, Jacob knows me, a lot of my friends know me. That's shocking. That is 100% shocking for me. But yeah, so then I made sure that it was in a little bit early, so that when it came time to have things due, that was also when finals week was coming up. So I wanted to make sure that I was able to focus on different things. So yeah, that was kind of the timeline that I followed. I know Jacob's going to have definitely something far different since he had interviews and stuff going in there. So that's going to be exciting to hear.
No, I mean, my timeline was actually pretty similar. Our applications are due in like December 1st, December 15th. So I was probably similar to you. I like you can start making your list or, as early as you want. So I started, somewhere over the summer, just making some Excel sheet list of different schools and what they require. And also around then, this is once again because this is what the more programs required of us. So we didn't have too much of a choice, but it ended up being good. You start writing like a generic statement very early on, so about summerish, and then it's a long process of like polishing it and getting feedback on this generic personal statement to like maybe like one school that you're interested in. And then once that was really good, I would just basically adapt it for all the different schools. And yeah, you change like a paragraph here or there, like to make it specific to those professors and those faculty. But for the most part, once I had a good statement, I tried to reuse it as much as possible. I think the only difference is with Natalie's is I had to apply to, or I wanted to apply to the NSF or just a couple fellowships. And most of the fellowships are also due around the same time as the applications. The only weird one is the NSF Graduate Research Fellowship, or the GRFP, which is due in like September, or like October, early October. And so that is something that that you need to do earlier. And so that was something I was also writing over the summer. What else? Yeah, the letters of rec, I asked for people in the fall, so that's a little closer, and it's still good, but it still gave them enough time to write. And then I pestered them until they submitted it. And then for us, at least for PhDs, the applications are not usually rolling. So it doesn't matter whether you get them in an hour before or a month before. So, I mean, a lot of us just submitted in the week before applications were due, just to get over. Or we submitted before around Thanksgiving or so we didn't have to worry about it during finals. But it's not like they give priority to the people who submitted earlier. And then, as Natalie mentioned, I guess the timeline, the only added timeline that I had is that after we submitted, there's the whole process of Zoom interviews and then in-person. We didn't do in-person interviews, but in-person interviews where they fly you out. That happens kind of throughout the spring. And then they give you offers, and then you have to accept them by April 15th, I want to say. And then you're finalized in your school. And then this is kind of a game because they're all offering you, they do the interviews and the offers at different times, but they can't force, at least for PhDs, they can't force you to say yes immediately. They have to at least give you until April 15th. So that's nice.
I was gonna add real fast. Jacob mentioned that he applied to NSF and different fellowships. I was so stupid, and I did not apply to scholarships in that time, and I definitely should have. It bit me. It definitely bit me. So I highly recommend in this time, if you have time, or if you don't make the time, to apply, because if you are not doing research where they're paying for your tuition, or they're paying you for the most part, that's that structure. But if you're like me, where you're not doing a thesis and you got to pay for school, my God, does it add up? So yeah, highly recommend throwing in those scholarship applications in there.
Yeah, so I mean, I applied to many more fellowships than just the NSF and did not get many of them, but I did get the NSF, and so it's nice. As Natalie mentioned, they'll pay for your tuition and your stipend if you're a PhD student. That can help you work with a lot of it opens up a lot of labs that might not otherwise have the funding to take you. The other thing, what was going to say, the thing with specifically for the NSF is you're allowed to apply once as a grad student and once as an undergrad. And so if you don't apply as an undergrad, you're kind of wasting that free chance, because even if you don't get it as an undergrad, you can always apply again. But once you're in grad school, you can only apply once. So I highly recommend applying to the NSF. It does require a research proposal, but it's a very good program.
Well, thank you guys both for sharing your timelines, not only on applying to grad school, but also about fellowships, which it seems are really important. And I know a lot of the deadlines, it sounds like, are coming up. So it's really helpful to know the timelines of two really successful applicants. So thanks again. And then for our next question, we wanted to zoom into a very specific part of the application process, process, which is writing the statement of purpose. So we wanted to ask, how do you write an effective statement of purpose?
Yeah. So what I did was I wrote my entire life story at first. I opened a Google Doc or I opened a Microsoft Word doc. I'm a Microsoft Word girly, I'm not gonna lie. And I just wrote out my entire life story. Like everything that I was passionate about, everything that formed me into the person that I am, my goals, my experiences, all of that. And from there, I was like, all right, this is a little TMI. Let's cut this one out. People don't even know about this. Let's cut that one out. And stuff like that. So then I wrote everything that I could, and then I cut it out. And then I got this like long, still very long story about myself, but at least it was polished to my best experience. And obviously I got feedback on it, edited a lot more. I had so many drafts, so many copies that I still have saved. And so what I did was, once I had that perfect, huge story that I wanted, I looked at every application and I listed out, and like I copied and pasted the prompts for all of them and listed them all out. The ones that were relating to statement of purpose in some shape or form. And so then what I did was, from there, 1,000 words, 500 words, 100 words. I took that story that I wrote that was polished, I pasted it, and I just cut until it was fitting that word count. So for me, that helped so much because I only had to write my statement of purpose once. And the rest was just editing, and it became so much more consumable. And I remember I had some friends that were rewriting their statement of purpose for each and every application, and they were like getting really overwhelmed with it. And I was like, try this. I swear it does wonders. So I highly recommend that. It helped me so much. And get that big chunk that you write out, get that one polished first, and then you can cut it down, and at least you'll know that your cut down version is still polished. And you can have someone gloss it over just to make sure, it still makes sense and stuff like that. But yeah, that's my recommendation.
Yeah, I strongly second that. I feel like that first statement, the like general statement that I wrote, was way longer than it needed to be because I wanted, it was kind of where I would just draw random paragraphs from. Some schools I would want to include, a paragraph about teaching or about the random outreach stuff, but sometimes I wouldn't want to include it, and so you could mix and match all you want. And essentially, this is so annoying because all the schools end up having slightly different essays with different length requirements. So some you'll need to cut them down more, and then they also call them all sorts of different things. Sometimes it's statement of purpose, sometimes it's personal statement, sometimes it's research statement, sometimes they split it up, sometimes they combine them. So just read the description of what they want, or email you can definitely email the program. They'll clarify what the application is supposed to be. And yeah, I agree. That strategy is very good. You want to have a story. I always like the storytelling angle. And that story can be whatever you want. It can be why you want to do this PhD and what you want to do afterwards. For a PhD, at least, you definitely want to, at least like in your research statement, you want to talk about your research experience and how that has motivated you. And then, if you've done other things like outreach, or, why you want to do those things and why they're important to you. What else? I would say some people don't think too much about this, but I think it's important. I think a lot of the phrasing for specific sentences can be really powerful. Even if, two versions of the same sentence have the same information, like, oh, okay, cool, you did this internship. Or I worked in a lab. Sure, that's the information, but I think active phrasing can really help. So a lot of people, when I read their statements, will say at Cal State or in this lab, I was exposed to the field of say biology. That's not a very active phrasing. A better way of phrasing that is to say I actively pursued, explored different programs, and it means that you're the one kind of pushing forward and exploring rather than just things happening to you. So I like the active phrasing. 100%. And also, Yeah, and I would also discourage from like a timeline like layout. It just gets kind of boring. Nothing it's not terrible, but like it just gets kind of boring where it's like this year, I don't know, in 2019 I did this, and then in 2020 I did this, and then in 2021 I did this. Like they don't need to see your full CV. Just tell a story about the things that are important.
Relates to our next question about challenges that arise in writing your statement of purpose. So there are these very like broad, general like writing problems like writer's block. How do you put words on a paper, and once you have like a initial draft, how do you like bring yourself to like look at this long, messy, like 3-page statement of purpose and like start cutting it down, start refining it, start editing. So that's a big like writing problem. And then more specific to the statement of purpose, like Jacob mentioned, it's not like a CV where you just say, okay, in the summer of 2019, I did this. In the summer of 2020, I did this. And then here are like all my research experiences. But how do you find like that one unifying thread that kind of connects everything, all of your experiences into a story? And then once you connected your past experiences to your story, how do you balance that with like your future goals and what you hope to get out of the PhD program?
Yeah, really, really important. I got writer's block so much. And what helped was stopping, taking a step back, which is why having that time starting early really, really helps, because if you get writer's block when you're procrastinating, God, are you stressed? Because you're like, oh my God, I might not get it done. So if you have your time, you can definitely 100% take time, step away, even for a few days, step away if you need to, and kind of have it naturally come back to you, or at least, just be able to bring that path back and get yourself recalibrated for writing back. And for me, I remember I had like a 6-page statement of purpose when I was done. And oh my God, did I not want to touch it. I was like, oh my God, please don't let me see this again. I was reading every sentence. I was like, this is the worst thing I've read in my life. I'm going jobless. I'm not getting to anything. I remember that. But I just took it into chunks. And like I said, because I allotted that time to myself, I was allowed to take it in chunks. So that is something that I 100% recommend. Do consumable bits and finding your own narrative. And as Selena said, that thread that connects it all together is you. You are the thread that connects everything together. Because there's so many different elements. There's an internship that happened in 2019. There's a class that was taken in 2020. What connects it? It was you who did both of those things. And so you have to talk about how these all connect to you and what you learned from it, how it impacted you, how it shaped you, because you are expressing yourself as a candidate, but also as a person. And I think that's something really important to understand, is that this personal statement, there's 2 different chunks to it. There's this professional work education one, and then there's you, and they want to get to know both of those sides. And so it's just really being able to weave between those, and saying, hey, I had this past experience. I took this class and it helped me realize this is what I want to do in the future. This is kind of like, or this is kind of like how the direction I want to go. Like I said, I did research. I realized not my forte. Frankly, I hated it. And it's weird for an EEPster to say that, because research is such a common theme for us EEPsters. And I completely understand that. So for me, I was like, oh my God, why do I hate this? Is there something wrong with me? And so for me, I wrote that in my in my statement of purpose. I said, I realized I didn't like research, and I thought that there was something wrong with me because everyone around me was doing research, and everyone around me was passionate about research too. And I just didn't feel the same way. And instead of taking it as there's something wrong with me, I was able to turn it around and realize that my talents and my passions belong somewhere else. And so I was able to turn that around, and that was something that I was proud of myself for being able to do. So yeah.
Yeah, I see Dante the live stream chat question. I'll get to that in a second. I agree. I think okay, well with writer's block, I think the main thing for me is just like, especially as EEPsters, like a lot of us, many of us feel are trained to be perfectionists, which is really unhealthy. Like I hate writing cringy sentences, but like it's just something, it's gonna happen. You have to do it for the personal statement. Like just write, like I don't care how you write it, just write the cringy stuff, and then you can rephrase it later, but just get it on the paper. Or like if you do have like a friend who you're comfortable talking with this, just try and like figure out the thread you're going to use by like spitballing with them, even if it's very informal, and then you can polish it up later. And I think like Natalie said, like the common thread is you, like this. So yes, technically you can spin whatever, you can spin your story however you want, but like at the end of the day, the easiest way to do it is to be honest. There should be some reason why you want to do this program or why your career is going this way. And that should be shaping the kinds of, especially for the younger students, the experiences that you're pursuing. You're not, most of the time, you're not just, doing XYZ program just because it looks good. You're doing it because you think you want to learn that topic, or you want to get experience in the field, or you find it interesting. So trying, I think the easiest way to go about it is to just be genuine. And if that is the case, then you can really speak from a much more powerful standpoint about like why you're, just how passionate you are about this, or why you think this is a good career for you, why you think it fits your skill set, and so forth. Let's see. And then the question from the chat is, if you pivoted from your previous research experiences, if particularly new methods, how did you convey why you wanted to pivot? I think, okay, well, to just one point, like the methods is like the easiest thing to pivot on in the world. Like when you come to grad school, they're assuming like, zero experimental techniques. And you're going to have, well, at least for biology, and you're like, they're going to show you their way just to make sure you're not breaking stuff. And so like everyone is expected to learn new methods. You're not expected to have all this expertise. In terms of, I think, like the overall field is the harder pivot, and the further the field, the harder the pivot. I came from biochemistry and then went into like more bioengineering, synthetic biology, which is not a large pivot. The main change is that it requires a lot more quantitative background. That's kind of what I took. But even in my application, I didn't say too much about that. I mean, I didn't even know at the time. So my application was all biochemistry. I think if you have absolutely no experience in that area, it can be hard. I would probably not talk a whole bunch about being interested in this area you have no experience in, because they're like, it just feels unsubstantiated. So in that case, I would try to just apply to a program in your background, and then try and work for, once you're in that program, then branch out and try to work in those different labs, take those other classes. If you do have some experience, then you can work from there. Like, oh, most of I was interested, but I turned out not to be that interested, but I did this one experience in this field and I really liked it and I want to learn more about it. Then that's easier. But people pivot all the time. Like, do not worry about it. It's a totally normal thing.
Well, thank you guys both for your answers to not only the questions that we asked, but to the chat question. And it seems like it's really important to be genuine. And that's definitely advice that I will take into account when writing my own applications. And then for our next question, we wanted to ask something about a different part of the application process that we touched on a little bit earlier, but from maybe a new angle. We wanted to ask, who did you ask for letters of recommendation? And specifically, why did you choose these people?
I mean, I'll go first because it's going to be really brief. I already said most of what I said about letters. I just asked my 3 research advisors. So it was a very easy decision. They can talk most about what makes a good PhD student and whatnot, and it can kind of vouch for that. The one thing I will say is have backups. So like I had a backup who was just a very good biochemistry professor at Cal State LA, who I took a couple classes with. So not, probably not the first person I would choose because I never did research with this person, but a good backup for sure. And this did come in handy because I did like for my NSF, like my most prominent research experience the letter just didn't go through. It was not submitted, and so that the backup letter was kind of was used in that case by the online system, and otherwise I would have been disqualified. So that would have been very bad.
Yeah, so actually, I did have a situation where one of my applications was disqualified, unfortunately, because someone didn't do it. So having backups, I highly recommend. Let's see. So the people that I asked, we have a fan favorite. We have Professor Chow, our favorite person. We love him all. I had him for all of my classes, all of my math classes up to Calc 2. And so I felt like he really was able to just estimate my quantitative ability there. And also he was someone who I bonded with Professor Chow because I went to office hours almost every single day for those 2 years that I was in his class. And then he was someone that was he was someone that donated to this fundraising team that I had for my type 1 diabetes. And so he came to like the walks. And so I felt like he also knew me as a person too. So I felt like he was a good person that could speak on my abilities. So then there was him. And then there was my mentor from Goddard. And that was the one who fell through, unfortunately, on one of the applications. He had a very busy life. So it's okay. I'm alive. I'm good. I'm where I'm at. So I asked him to, because he was my mentor at that time. I was doing that internship at that time, and I thought that was really appropriate. And then the last person I asked was the chair of the electrical engineering department at Cal State LA, because I had him for a class, and he had told me that I made a lasting impression on him, and I was like, holy cow. And so then I came to him for advice every single semester. When I had my classes together, I would do a check-in with him, or if I had any questions, I would call him or email him. And so he was someone who got to understand my motivation and my goals too, because I was sharing these are my goals, and he got to see me grow as a student and as a person over the years that I was at Cal State LA. And I even just saw him recently. I visited Cal State LA recently, and he saw me and he's like, oh my God, Natalie. And I was like, you remember me? But yeah, so those are the 3 people that I chose.
Same line of thought. I know Jacob and Natalie, you guys both mentioned attaching like a small blurb about yourself and then like a CV or resume to your emails, to your letter writers. But was there any other like application material that you attached? So for example, since you guys both started your statement of purposes like in the summer, or at least like before you reached out to your letter writers, did you attach your statement of purpose? Because I know some people like to get feedback from their letter writers as well, because those are like, at least for research programs, those people are likely like similar people to your letter writers, or PIs are the ones reading their applications. So just in general, what did you attach when you were reaching out to your letter writers? And yeah, did you have any like specifications, like please touch on this, and this aspect of my application?
Really briefly. Sometimes I did, I think, because I think I did have my general statement finished by then. Some people will have, it just depends how much time they have. A lot of professors don't have the time to read like a full application. And that's when like you want to give them like the bulleted versions, like as scaffolded as possible. Like just tell them like focus on these areas, or just have a chat with them. That's sometimes more time efficient too if they're very busy. Yeah.
Yeah, I was trying to remember right now. I can't remember if I did my statement of purpose. I don't think I did because it wasn't fully done by then. Or maybe I did, but I remember I attached my resume and something that was like written about me. It was like a blurb about me, whether it was a statement of purpose itself or just something that I had briefly written. And then I like linked like my LinkedIn in the email. I told them, if you guys have any questions, if you want to do like a meeting, we can do that. There was someone who wanted me to like kind of create like a frame as to like what I expected in there. So I did that. But yeah, that was pretty much it.
And then on the same topic of contacting like faculty, we wanted to ask, did you contact any faculty from like the institutions that you were applying to? And if so, do you recommend doing it? And if so, what is one thing that you should include in like your emails, like publications you read, how your interests align, stuff like that?
I'm gonna just quickly say it. I did not. I feel like this is more applicable to Jacob, and just those who are applying to research groups and have to talk to them. So Jacob, please take this question.
Yes, I would highly recommend doing this. One, because the websites are always outdated. You don't know if if the professors are good people. You want to work with someone who's nice and a good mentor. So I recommend sending out as many emails as you have time to send out. It takes time, but so I sent out a ton of emails, and then like the vast majority of them won't respond, and that is just like a fact of life. They get like 1,000 emails a day. Most of them won't see your email, but enough will. You might like talk with them over Zoom, or you can talk with a grad student or something, and then get a little bit more information, and that's very, very helpful. Like it probably won't make you more likely to get in, but this is for your sake. Like, is there a lab at this school that I would be willing to work with? That sort of thing. And then once you interview, you get way more opportunities to do the same kind of thing. Talk to professors, talk with people in their lab. But yeah, grad students are going to give you the most reliable information. It's more than the website, more than so that should be paramount. And I will say, when you're emailing, I guess emailing these professors is kind of easy because you want it to be as short as possible. The shorter your email, the more likely they will actually read it. The shorter and clearer the purpose. Like all you need to get across is that you're an undergrad who is interested in applying and you want to talk with someone in the lab. That is it. Like you might have a short blurb about what your background is or who you worked with, but don't include like a whole paragraph about your life story or I did research in these areas. They're not going to read it. They just want to know that you want to talk to someone, and then they'll forward your email to a grad student.
We do have a couple of questions left, but since it's 11:30, Natalie and Jacob, are you guys okay with going a little bit more and finishing these questions, or are we? Okay, great. Yeah, in that case, I guess on the in line with faculty advisors, I guess this is a little bit more applicable for like Jacob for research-based grad programs. But yeah, at a stage when you were when you accepted an offer and you were deciding which faculty to work with, were there any like deciding factors? So I know some people really prioritize like how hands-on the faculty member is, how much freedom they have in their research, or was it more on like the actual research projects that they were working on? So I guess in general, when you were deciding to reach out to faculty versus when you were accepted an offer and you were actually planning to go into somebody's lab, what were the factors that made you decide which faculty to go with?
This is indeed a multi-dimensional problem. There are so many aspects of what makes a lab a good lab, and typically, you can tell pretty easily, even though there's so many factors. That's why I say rotations are so critical. Well, lots of programs have rotations. In biology, you should find one that has rotations, because really, like the best way to know if the lab is going to be a good fit is to just work with them for like 10 weeks, 5-10 weeks. And of course, just to talk to grad students. But in terms of what those factors are, yes, okay, projects, of course, like, are you interested? But this is like actually a pretty small portion of it. Like, you just need the projects to be interesting enough to, like, get you up in the morning, and like something that you could bounce off of, even if you could pivot after your PhD, but just something you find interesting. And then, like, how big is that bubble of expertise? I would say, sometimes there's like, our lab has a very large, what's it called? A very large, like, spread of projects. So there's, even if our lab isn't currently doing something, there's many different areas you could work in. Or some labs are much more focused, and there's not as much room for doing a project that's way different. But yeah, projects shouldn't. For me, at least, were not the majority of why I joined a particular lab. Environment and mentorship were. So part of the environment is like, how big is the lab, and that's kind of correlated with how hands-on the PI is. I'm in a very big lab now. It's probably like 15 grad students and 10 postdocs. And then, like, our smattering of undergrads whenever they come in. And so I like that big environment, because in that sort of lab, I still see my PI a lot, miraculously. But when I'm talking with my PI, it's about high level science. It's about my project overall, the directions we want to move in, or just interesting other tidbits. Whereas if I'm, like, having a problem with an experiment, or like the machine broke, I just go to someone like a postdoc or someone else in the lab. Like that, I don't need my PI to solve that problem. Whereas some PIs do like to be down in the weeds of the experiments and the protocols and stuff like that. So some people prefer that. Let's see what else. Like, time expectations it's harder to gauge, but that is one as well. Like, my PI doesn't care how we manage. Like, our time management is fully up to us. How often we come into lab, when we come into lab, he just wants to make sure the work's getting done. Some PIs do have much clearer expectations about how often you're supposed to be in lab, how long you're supposed to be in lab, and whatnot. And kind of correlated with that is, like, are they okay with you spending your time doing things outside of lab? Well, both for fun, but also like academic things that are not research related, like clubs, teaching, and things like that. So, like, I did want to do a lot of these things, and so my PI is perfectly supportive of spending some of my time on those. And then there's, like, mentorship. Like, does your PI just want like treat you like a worker who's gonna, like, submit, pump out data, or do they care about training you as a scientist, who will sit with you and work on your presentations, who will sit with you and write with you to teach you how to be a good writer, because we do so much writing, that kind of thing. Yeah. And then, yeah, of course, there's, like, the social environment of the lab. Like, are the people fun? Are there, like, social activities? Do you vibe with the people? Yeah. And so I'm very happy in my lab right now. I think we have all of those things. Yeah.
Yeah, so it sounds like I think we mentioned a couple of times throughout this seminar, but it sounds like rotations are a very big part in deciding which lab is the best fit for you. And going back to a point that Jacob mentioned a little bit earlier, applying to programs that have multiple labs that you'd be interested in working with is kind of a good base for doing rotations. Yeah, and I guess just to close off this whole section on, like, applications, do you guys have any general tips for applying to graduate school? Just very general, whatever your, like, top 3 tips are.
Start early. That's pretty much it.
I think, let's see, what are some, well, just to, like, piggyback off what I was just saying, I think, yeah, your advisor is, like, if you're in a PhD program, is the number one determining factor of how happy you will be. So, like, I think, yeah, having multiple options is absolutely essential. And, the PI will certainly make or break, like, that will be your life for the next 5 or 6 years. So that it will literally make or break your experience. So it is it's an important decision. Like, you shouldn't stress too much about it, but like think very hard about what you want. And I would say more broadly, my advice, especially for us EEPsters, is like think big picture about like what you want. A lot of people will kind of just do the step in front of them that is like the most obvious, or like has the least like barrier. And like in a lot of cases, that's just going the academic route, because like everyone kind of like silently pushes you down that route. But like, I think there's a lot of value. I mean, the strategy that I think a lot of people take is think about the types of skills that you have and that you like to do. You know, do I like writing? Do I like working with people? Do I like managing? Or could I like managing? Could I like mentoring, teaching? And then how often do you like, how much do you want to work? Like, some jobs are very all the time going hard kind of jobs, and some jobs can be, way more chill. Like, what kind of work-life balance do you want in the long term? And then kind of narrow down from there, like, what kind of careers are good for those different sorts of things? Do I even need grad school in the first place? A lot of jobs don't need that type of grad school, or you could have a much more focused program. And just kind of think, and then kind of remembering that decision throughout this. It could change for sure, but like, I think it's important to remember that like you're living a life as well. As like, in grad school, it's easy to get kind of sucked into your experiments and whatnot. But like, I'm in my 20s now, and like, I want to do like 20s things. I want to be hanging out with my friends and going on trips when I can. I don't want to like forget those things just to be, I don't know, working on some experiment that's not going to work and that will never make it to a paper. But yeah, so like, at least for me, I don't know which kind of research I want to go into yet, academic or industry, but I knew at the very least that when I say I like research, it means like what skills are involved with research. There is a lot of independence in solving problems. I do like kind of going after problems and just tracking them down. There's a lot of learning about new fields, reading papers, taking classes, and I like that. There's a lot of big question thinking about just how nature works, and I think that's fun. In grad school, there's a very flexible schedule. That's something that I kind of wanted, and then I get to work with a lot of other really smart people, and that is something that I really enjoy about research. These are all things about that I figured I would want, and that's kind of what led me to the decision to do grad school and then eventually research. And then now I have to ask these same sorts of questions, but in just a slightly different sense when I'm deciding between industry and academia. Like, how much do I want to work? How many hours a day? Academia is a very 24/7 kind of job. Do I want to be writing a lot more, or more in a more management type of position, that sort of thing.
Dang, okay, hold on. Hold on. I just said one sentence. So let me add a little bit more. Jake kind of went into grad school life too. So top advice, again, start your grad school application early. Watch out for your mental health when you're in grad school, 100%. Or just in general, watch out for your mental health. I feel like EEPsters can have very intimate experiences with mental health and just college students in general. So definitely watch out for your mental health. Again, echoing what Jacob said, don't be afraid to have fun. But yeah, I know we're going to talk about experience in just a sec. So yeah, those are my things. But if we're just talking about application, start early, get feedback. And yeah.
Well, thank you both for your answers. And we actually did want to pivot like right now to grad school experience. So I guess piggybacking on what both of you said, can you describe a typical week in the life of a graduate school student? Like, how is grad school different from undergrad? What do you like most about grad school? What do you like the least?
Grad school, well, for one, it is very different than undergrad. I think that it has to be something that you are ready for. Undergrad, for me, or at least like my perspective of it is very like you're doing a lot of random things. You have all these. Some people have a lot of these things on their CV that you're trying to do. Whereas I think grad school is much less about that and more just, well, yes, it's about your research. In like the first year or two, you're taking a few classes while doing research, and then now I'm full-time in research. And like, yeah, I might like TA a class here or there, but full-time research, which means that on a day-to-day basis, I wake up at some point, I go into lab, I might mess around in a lab, I might do experiments, I might sit at my desk and make figures or write or read papers. I'll have some meetings, but I try to minimize, like definitely not as much like random club meetings as would be in like undergrad. These are like me, asking someone in the lab for help, or, having a meeting with a collaborator or something like that. And yeah, then I come home when I feel like I've done enough for the day. And then, I might make dinner, I might hang out with some friends, and I watch some TV with my roommate. And then that's just during the week. There's a lot of random events on campus that will have, lots of free food, which is nice. There might be like a seminar, which is great because someone comes and like explains science that actually works in like an easily digestible format. The seminars are great. And then the weekends, we're not expected to work too much. Some people will do small things over the weekend, or I might do things on my computer if I have nothing better to do. But I try to do fun things on the weekend. I hang out with my girlfriend who is at UCLA right now. I will go to the beach. Yeah, I think that's kind of my normal week.
For me, right now I'm in the summer, I'm working full-time at JPL. During the semester, I have a cap of 30 hours max, but on the days that I do have class, I take 2 classes per semester. So on the days I do have class, I don't work. So twice a week I'm at home. So Monday, right now, Monday I'm at work. Tuesday in the daytime, I'm doing homework. Tuesday in the evening, I have class. Wednesday in the daytime, I'm at work. Wednesday evening, hanging out with JPLers or something. We go to a comedy show that is at this one bar that we always go to. And then Thursday, I'm doing work again, happy hour. There's always a happy hour that we have going on. There's trivia, really fun stuff. Friday, I have class. And then after class, I go out and I hang out with my friends that are more local or stuff like that. And then weekends, catching up on homework, going out with my friends. I love doing karaoke with my friends, so that's something that I do. Right now it's football season, so I'm going to a lot of football games for USC, and that's really fun. And that is what is different from Cal State LA. Cal State LA does not have that huge, it doesn't have football, right? So but in general, just a huge sports culture that USC has, like it revolves around that. And so it's actually pretty cool. And so I get to explore a lot more of that student social life when at USC. And that's something that I really like, doing. And then what do I like most about graduate school? I like the fact that everybody who's in your classes are they're there by choice. I feel like I came across a lot of people who were in their undergrad and they were there because their parents made them go there or they felt obligation to go there. And you found a lot of people who were not as motivated as you find in grad school. You have a lot of people who share the same passions and share the same interests as you because of the fact that you guys are all in the same programs. And so that's something that is really cool. And you find a lot of different age groups, but everyone has the same passion, and that is what you guys are working on. And so I think that's something that's really cool and that I deeply enjoy. So that was something that I loved. The thing that I like the least is, the amount of catch up that I have to do going from electrical engineering to mechanical engineering concepts. And yeah, so that is one of the difficulties that I'm having, but I love it. I love learning about the different things and seeing how they apply to space. And so that is something that I'm so grateful for. So yeah, that's what I would say.
Yeah, if I might want to add on. You remind me of a few things. So a pro, but also a con of grad school is that there are not very often there are set hours. So not only mentioned, like if you're working for a company, typically they keep track of your hours for pay reasons. For us, we have no, sometimes, okay, some days for sure I could come home at like, 2 p.m. if I need to do something in the afternoon, or it's been a long week, or I could show up in the lab whenever I want. Other times, like, especially with computational work, it's like if I feel like I might need to do something on like the weekends or random hours of the day, or come in on a weekend to do an experiment because of a time sensitive thing, or just to squeeze it into that week. So time management is like a double-edged sword. You definitely, yeah, it's very hard to set that work-life balance for yourself and not feel bad, like, because there are always people who are working way harder than you, especially in like my lab. There are people who are in lab like many hours a day, 7 days a week, and sometimes you feel like you have to match that to be doing as well as them. And it's very hard to still set that balance for yourself. This is field specific as well. There are other fields like organic chemistry where it might just be the norm to work on Sundays as a normal work day. And is that something you're willing to do? What else? What else we were saying? I think one of the hard things of grad school is that like you're playing a very long game, and most things won't work for PhD, at least for research. It's very easy to like equate your project to yourself and like your self-worth. Most things won't work, and the things that do work will take a very long time, and that is very discouraging a lot of the time. So you want to make sure you're surrounding yourself with people, both scientifically and not, that will support you through that, so that you have fun experiences outside of lab, but also that you have science people who you can talk about fun and interesting science with, so that that can be motivating for what's next, or who can help you solve your problem. Because otherwise, if it's just you're just kind of seeing the thing that's not working, and you're trying really hard to fix it, but it's still not working, and then that's just super discouraging.
Yeah, it's very interesting to hear both of your perspectives on grad school, even though you're in very different like grad programs. Natalie's in a more like a grad program that leads into industry, whereas Jacob is in a grad program that's very research based. But it's still very interesting to see or hear like themes across both of your answers. So I think that was really useful. And then for a little bit more perspective on like our unique situation as EEPsters, I guess Natalie kind of touched on this a little bit in her answer on how there are people of different age groups in graduate programs, and what she likes is that they're also focused on like the same goal and the same passion. But for us specifically as EEPsters, do you think there was anything different about your grad school experience, or how did your experience in EEP kind of shape your experience in grad school?
I would say the main thing, which I also faced in undergrad a little bit, was when after like a test or something, or after class, and everyone's like, let's go grab a drink, let's go to a bar. And I was like, I'm gonna go home. I'm not able to go. But it's the age difference that typically is highlighted when I was at Cal State LA. I remember people learned that I was younger. They're like, oh my God, that's crazy. You must be so smart. And I was like, okay, thanks. No, yeah. But that age difference that happens, it becomes much more normalized because you have people who are different age groups, and it's really cool to see that. And so definitely as time goes on, the age gap that we tend to have from our peers becomes less and less, just less and less important and noticeable, really. And it's something that at first I was like, wait, I want to be special, but now I'm like, no, I enjoy it. I enjoy the fact that I'm able to be taken seriously. And well, I mean, I was always taken seriously, but not be treated any different because I'm a younger peer. And so that's something that I deeply appreciate. But in terms of differences, I mean, I feel like the one thing that I do miss is that very tight-knit community that EEP provided. Going to Big Bear every year, going to Catalina every year, formal, those, and just going into the kitchen and having a dedicated space. And also that was also because, you know, I had more classes. And so I spent a lot more time on campus. And so I had a space that I was able to hang out with. For me now, I go to class, I drive to class, I go park, I go to class, and I leave, and I come back home. And so, and that's because I have night classes, so there's not as much student life going on during those night classes. Obviously, if it was during daytime, I would have more things to do. But yeah, that is something that is different. But I do have my, you know, you do find your community. I have my community, but I do miss the tight knit bond that I had with my cohort and just with other people in EEP. But yeah, I don't feel like there's any difference that has been like a hurdle necessarily, or anything that has hindered me in any way. I feel like I have been able to grow as a person, and being an EEPster has not stopped me in any way. And it's great. And that's exactly how it should be. Being an EEPster should not be ever stopping you or being a hurdle in any way.
Yeah, I agree with Natalie. Like the EEP is intended, you know, there should be some gradual process by which you no longer feel like quote unquote an EEPster, and you just feel like a normal, a person. So like nowadays, most people don't know that I was an EEPster. Some people do. It's kind of unavoidable. They don't make too much of a big deal of it. Like Natalie said, there's just a wide age range. I work with people who are like 35, and they're some of my good friends. So there's just a large spread, and just kind of the nature of things. Yeah, I think like Natalie mentioned, really the only like concrete way that it ever impacts you is anything related to alcohol. But there are other ways of hanging out with grad students, and you don't have to be at like a bar. I realize this is live streamed and recorded, so reach out to me if you have more questions about that. But yeah, for the most part, it's not something that's too noticeable. But like Natalie mentioned, like a bigger thing about just leaving EEP in general for any EEPster is not having that very clearly scaffolded group of people. And it's very, very difficult to maintain connections, but and definitely find new friends when you no longer have that scaffolded group. Grad school, I mean, this especially applies to people who don't go to grad school, because then you're just out in the big wide world and you have to make new friends, and that's really hard. But in grad school, it's still hard, but I mean, there are at least like a lot of my friends are grad students, so there are at least people around, but it's not like EEP where there's like a very clear class of people. My friends aren't from like the same PhD program, and I had to meet them at socials and other places around campus. So it's hard, but once you have your group, it gets easier.
I guess alcohol is a common theme, because I can also think of stories when I really felt I was an EEPster and people were all around me were offering drinks. But it's good to know that experience no longer really exists once you're in grad school, even if it's at the cost of things like less interactions with people. But yeah, thank you again both for your answers. And I actually want to ask Stelina a question here. Is that all the questions we wanted to ask? All of the questions we have time for?
We have a couple of extra questions, but those are most of the main questions that we wanted to cover. I did have a follow-up question though. So I know a lot of people when they enter EEP, there's this like kind of very like magical experience, like Natalie kind of touched on thinking like, oh, you're so special because you entered college so young. But when, I think this is also applicable as you spend more time in EEP, and you like gain more exposure to like the university kind of rhythm of taking classes, doing research, doing extracurricular activities. That kind of idea that you're in EEP doesn't become like that, doesn't have that big of an impact on your activities anymore. And it sounds like that kind of grows more prominent as you get into grad school as well. And I know a lot of EEPsters around me, they kind of, there's kind of like this growing pains of like growing out of that idea that like you're so special because you're an EEP, and having EEP kind of define your identity and define how like unique you are. So I guess for like the general audience out there, no matter if they're applying to grad school or not, do you guys have any advice on like finding your own unique perspective on the world and like finding your unique passion like outside of EEP and defining your identity outside of just being an EEPster?
Unless Natalie wants to go first. I'm glad you all are self-aware of this fact. It is just a fact of EEP. It happens. EEP should not, at some point, it should not be part of your identity. And it's hard. I think, well, for me in particular, like the easiest way to grow out of that was going to Caltech, because like there's always someone who is better than you at everything. So, there's always going to be, there are like people who are like, the top student in their country, or I work with people who, they work like twice as hard as I do, or they go to a class and they just everything instantly clicks for them, or, people who can remember everything they've ever heard. There are people who are very, I recognize the fact that people who are much, much smarter than me, and that's okay. And I just have to do, I do what I do, and I'm good enough at it. And yeah, and I have fun outside of lab. I think, yeah, you have to, you can be an independent and, you can be an independent and full person without being like super smart because you went to college early.
Yeah. So I think it's so funny that Jacob is saying, yeah, there's going to be someone that's smarter than you, that's so good. And like, you just look at them and you're like, damn, how can I not be them? Because I spent my entire EEP years thinking that of Jacob. So this is crazy. This is a full circle moment for me. But I would say I remember, like I said earlier, I liked being special, and I like the fact that I was an EEPster, and it was like, oh my God, this is a fun fact about me. And then, time goes on, you learn that there's other different fun facts about you. And I'm actually going to take something that Jacob said and twist his words a little bit. He said EEP shouldn't always be a part of your personality. And for me, EEP will always be a part of my personality, but it will not define my personality. And I feel like Jacob can 100% agree with that. It does not define you. It is a part of the person that you are, and it's a part of your origin. And I can see Jacob's agreeing with me, but it should never define you. And even now, it should not define you. You are still your own person, aside from your accomplishments, aside from what you've done and where you're going. You are your own person. And that is something important to recognize. And it's just as you navigate in life in general, and I feel like this just gets into a bigger conversation about, the meaning of life and all of that. But as you navigate life in general, you're going to find things, and you're going to find people, and you're going to find experiences. These are all going to be different things that define you as a person, just in tidbits, and it's going to all add up to who you are. And so for me, I define myself in the way that I make my friends laugh, because I think I'm a funny person. I like to think I'm a funny person. I define myself in the experiences that I've had with my partner. We've had some really great experiences, just kind of traveling and stuff. And so I define myself in those karaoke nights that I go to. I define myself in just these different ways, even in the moments where I'm alone and I'm laying in bed playing Mario like I was this morning. And so you just find different ways, and you find different ways of connecting with people and clicking with people. And I feel like this goes into the, finding your own group outside. You will find your own group, you will find other people, and more importantly, you will find yourself. And yeah, it's a beautiful, beautiful growing pain, honestly. And I am so grateful for EEP, and I'm so grateful for when it was so central and so central to me, and it was a core of me. And it's as you grow, and I feel like this is what EEP is meant for you to do, is to help you grow. And as you grow, it becomes less and less a part of your personality and what people see of you, but people see you for a lot of things, and it's really cool.
Yeah, well, thank you for those very insightful answers. I think kind of this is maybe a little bit outside the scope of this panel. We'd have to do a whole other panel on this, but yeah, in general, I think this is kind of almost like a mandatory growing pain that all EEPsters have to go through. And I think being able to find your own identity and recognize that there are other parts about you that define you as a person. I think that, like Natalie said, I think that's a very beautiful part, because you realize, oh my gosh, I'm so much more than this program in Los Angeles that I was a part of. And yeah, so I guess, Dante, do we have any questions in the chat? Because I guess unless Samuel, you have any other follow-up questions you wanted to ask? Okay.
No, I think we're fine. Chat looks empty, and I do have to get up and leave soon, so I think we're good.
In that case, thank you guys all for your time and for your insight into these questions. I'm sure it was helpful for me and Samuel, and I'm sure it was helpful for a lot of the other EEPsters watching this as well. Samuel, do you have any closing comments?
No, I just want to echo what you said. We really appreciate that you guys took time out of your, I assume, very, very busy schedules to come here, talk to us. We relive your EEP days. And yeah, we really appreciate it. Thanks again.
Okay.
Thank you, guys.
Yeah, Natalie and Jacob, do you guys have any closing statements or?
No, thank you for organizing this.
Yeah, I mean, that's pretty much it. If anybody has any questions, please feel free to reach out and ask.
Oh yeah, reach out to us. If you don't have our contact information, yeah, email, I guess Samuel or Selena, and they have our emails.
Yeah, we'll post it.
Yeah, please feel free to. And yeah, best of luck to those applying.
Yeah.
Great. Good day to you all.
Okay. I guess this concludes our panel then. Thank you again. And good luck with grad school and grad school apps to those watching. Okay. Bye.